Hello? 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 Everyone can hear me?
Good morning. Good morning.
No?
Good morning, Laura.
Can we turn it up a little?
It's on. We're on.
How about now? How about now?
It's supposed to be in 4, not 3.
Hello? There you go. Okay. Hello. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to those of you here in our sanctuary and to those of you viewing us online. My name is Laura Griglack, and I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint, a progressive LGBTQ+ affirming religious community. If you would like more information about our faith tradition or this congregation, please feel free to talk with one of our ministers today or via their contact information found at uuflint.org. Visitors are especially invited to attend coffee hour downstairs after the service, and any of us would be happy to tell you more about our congregation. You may also sign up for our weekly email newsletter by visiting our website, scanning the QR code on the order of service, or by completing the card in the seat backs here in the sanctuary. Please see the back of the order of service and e-update for more details on the following announcements. I believe there's a slide. There we go. There we go. We'd like to welcome a very special guest pianist, Adrienne B. Torf. You might remember her performance of Freedom Suites with Voices of the Revolution 2 years ago. Adrienne is a composer and pianist who works range from solo performances and recordings such as Here I Am from 2025, Two Hands Open in 2003, and Brooklyn from the Roof in 1987. She composed an award-winning theater piece, Poetry for the People, The June Jordan Experience, for Fountain Theater in LA, and the opera theater piece for Women Serving Time in Washington, D.C. She and renowned poet, teacher, and activist June Jordan were artistic collaborators for 19 years. Adrienne recently retired from a career as a nonprofit CFO and has served on numerous nonprofit boards. The event that brings Adrienne here is what I'd like to highlight next. The Awesome, Difficult Work of Love is a community performance of poetry, music, and visual art that UUCF is helping to sponsor. Adrienne and our own Lisa Sarno received a grant to present this spectacular evening. We hope you will attend Friday, May 22nd from 7 to 9 p.m. with a reception to follow. Lastly, well, actually not lastly, I have a couple I'm tagging on, but I do want to pitch the Flint Regional Herbal Collaborative, which is meeting today at 12:15 after coffee hour in Blackington Hall downstairs. We will be learning about alcohol extraction and how to make tinctures. All are welcome. Please come join us. I also have a couple of additional announcements that we don't have slides for. One is a reminder that the first weekend in June, June 7th, there will be a congregational meeting held after church. So make sure you guys mark, anyone who's a member, mark your calendars for that. And then I also want to just remind everybody that just outside the sanctuary, here to the left, there's a big long table full of wonderful free books. And these books come from a couple different places. We have some extras from our library that are out there, as well as several books that are from Revlynn and Revjerry, their lifelong collection. So really cool. It's free. Go out there, peruse, browse. Take something home. We're now going to light the chalice. At its best, our chalice symbolizes more than warmth, more even than light, for its flame can be a beacon of hope, which leads us toward many truths about ourselves, the cosmos, and about existence. Please join me in reciting our covenant. Recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Look to this day, for it is the very life of life. In its brief course, life, all the varieties, all the realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is but a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise every morning. Praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, peace of day. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Thank you. Please be seated.
During our musical meditation, as usual, you may light candles up front for a joy or concern, or you can do so in the back or right in our book as well for publication in the weekly e-update. Our words for meditation today are a poem by Joyce Kilmer, who passed away in World War I. And this should sound familiar to you. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made for fools like me, but only God can make a tree. Let us enter into the silence. Amen and blessed be.
Emerson believed that everything was created by mind, consciousness. So the mountains, the trees, everything in nature is part of you, and we are part of it. And according to Emerson, when we understand that, fully understand that, we finally know how to speak and act according to the sacred natural laws. From his essay, Nature, Chapter 4, Language. We are thus assisted by natural objects in the expression of particular meanings. But how great a language to convey such peppercorn information. Did it need such noble races of creatures, this profusion of forms, this host of orbs in heaven, to furnish us with the dictionary and grammar for our municipal speech? Whilst we use this grand cipher to expedite the affairs of our pot and kettle, we feel that we have not yet put it to use. Neither are we able. We are like travelers using cinders of a volcano to roast their eggs. And now, a modern paraphrase of this same passage, because Emerson wasn't good at dumbing things down for the rest of us. Nature helps us express our ideas, which is ironic because the universe is out there doing fantastic stuff that we might think is only expensive CGI special effects. Supernovas, tectonic plates, waterfalls that look like they were designed by artificial intelligence on LSD. And we use all that cosmic grandeur to say things like, honey, what's for supper? Or, that traffic around Ann Arbor is terrible. It's like owning a luxury sports car just to drive it to the mailbox. We've got intricate natural ecosystems running with perfect efficiency for millions of years, to which we humans at most say, wow, dude, incredible. But then it takes you 5 long phone calls to learn that your knee surgery might be covered by your insurance. And we don't feel the irony. We're like tourists. Our tents pitched on a mostly hidden, immense, active volcano. We heat our hot dogs and coffee on the steaming cracks and think what great use we are making of whatever power it is that is down there. His family and friends called him Waldo, and Ralph Waldo Emerson liked that. Back in that day, when someone called you by your middle name, it meant you were part of their inner circle, and that felt good. So this morning, we'll call Emerson Waldo, because he is definitely part of this group. And it would be good to understand why he is the most important prophet of our many prophets. But as you may know, some people nowadays think it is uncool, even foolish, to assume that thinkers of an earlier age, even Ralph Waldo, that they might have some advice for today's troubled world. Today, I invite you to think about that and ask, why would we turn down any insights old or new, that might heal the wounds of our planet. Many of you already know Waldo's story, but we have converts here who know his name, but not much else. In the 1820s, he read the research on the Bible coming out of Europe and realized that his intuition about Christianity was correct. The miracles in the Bible were not literally true. It was mythology. And Jesus was obviously a great spiritual prophet, but not the only Son of God. Like those of us who came to the same conclusions in our own time, Waldo quit his church. But oops, he was the minister of the church he quit. So goodbye, perfectly good job. So please, if you take a time machine into the past to warn President Lincoln, go a little bit further back in time and say to Waldo, it might be best to not quit your job until you have secured another one. Emerson hadn't. Waldo, the only skill you have is being a visionary. Have you ever done a job search under the heading, Wanted Visionary? There's nothing there, I tell you, Waldo. Lucky for us, when we quit a church that seems out of date, we don't have to create a new church to replace the one we left. We just find this one, the one Waldo built, albeit in slow motion. It wasn't until the 1930s that Unitarianism fully adopted his vision. Waldo and the people he influenced built it around a new God simply called nature. His understanding of nature as God is well captured in the Zen poem, "My ears found the sermon dull and stale, but in the woods outside, the nightingale." Now, it takes some nerve to recite that poem at the beginning of your own sermon, so no looking out the window, please, or just quickly. And I'm going to ask you to stay in here for just 40 more minutes, about, and do that before you get back outside, and I'll try to bring some nature inside to you as a reward. Planting gardens, because they are pretty, goes way back. But planting and arranging 840 acres of green in the middle of a city to make it naturally healthy, that was new. In 1840, Andrew Jackson Downing, now known as the father of American landscape architecture, said New York City needed a big park. Not just because it would be pretty, but because it would be a sanctuary that soothes the mind, offering peace and reflection. Mind you that today, we have hundreds of studies showing that plenty of exposure to green and blue spaces is linked to lower rates of depression, anxiety, and stress. It also brings about a decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, better sleep, better blood pressure, and better thinking. Downing didn't have all of that evidence. He was guessing. Or we might say he knew intuitively that being in nature was a whole lot healthier than being among the jungle of buildings that even in 1840 was New York City. We don't know that Downing had read Emerson's Nature, but if he had, he would have read the moral influence of nature upon every individual is the amount of truth which it illustrates to him. How much tranquility has been reflected to man from the azure sky? In 1836, Ralph Waldo knew that being under a blue sky could make you more tranquil, even more moral. And you didn't have to pray to the sky for wisdom or health. You just had to be in its presence. What a nice God is nature. Of course, Andrew Jackson Downing was no Emerson. No Emerson writing philosophy about the power of nature within us. Downing was an artist who understood and enacted that knowledge. And no surprise, Emerson believed it is the artists, not necessarily the preacher, priest, or pastor, who becomes nature's servant. In 1850, seeking help with his many landscaping projects, Downing hired a Frenchman, Calvert Vaux, who would later ask in turn for the help of Frederick Olmsted. Downing worked tirelessly to convince New Yorkers that they needed nature and lots of it in their city. But he tragically died in a steamboat accident in 1852. It was left to his disciples, Vaux and Olmsted, to enter their plans into a contest for what Central Park would look like. Vaux and Olmsted knew that they didn't want formal gardens and a grand promenade traveling under marble archways. That stuff was for European queens and kings. Downing, Vaux, and Olmsted wanted to bring a big slice of real nature to the middle of New York City that would be for everyone because everyone owned it. But that isn't easy, because mirroring nature is much harder than making a formal garden with their nice straight lines and symmetry. That's easy. But nature, perhaps you've noticed, can be messy and beautiful at the same time. The contest started in 1857, and Vaux and Olmsted, along with 33 other designers, submitted their plans to build the park their mentor had dreamed of for so many years. And speaking of messy, Emerson's description of how we need to wake up to the wisdom of nature inside of us were thought to be very messy too. His essay, Nature, didn't sell well, and only 500 copies were initially printed. Many who read it found it hard to follow, to put it mildly. That's why today's reading from Nature was partly a modern paraphrase. It was never good bedtime reading. Author and fellow transcendentalist Elizabeth Peabody urged Waldo to write another book to clarify what the heck he was talking about. Basically, she wanted Nature for Dummies. It would have been a good idea. Author Herman Melville said, Emerson is so transcendental, he doesn't have a bone in his body. Ouch. But I think understanding the core of Emerson's beliefs will help us understand his essay. That is, its essay has now been called America's Primal Book. Environmentalists today say it shaped American ecological imagination by presenting nature as a living, spiritual, and intellectual force. Wow. Well, how did he do that? Emerson was saying that everything, you, me, the plants, the animals, the mountains, the blue sky, are all one thing, of one consciousness that built creation, idealism. This wasn't Christianity, but it was nothing new. Plato of the Greeks, the ancient Rig Veda of India, influenced Emerson, who, like you use today, liked to explore other religions. From the Vedas of India, we read, in the beginning, Brahman was this. It knew only itself. I am Brahman. Through that, it became all. This is ultimate non-dualism. I am that, thou art that, all this is that. So a God didn't make anything. Brahman is energy, not a God, and very much like in the Big Bang, Brahman became all of creation. Hell and heaven are mixed together right here and now, are part of a whole, and it's up to us to lean towards the heaven because it feels better. But you can forgive those who lean towards hell because that's in you too. Emerson brought this ancient wisdom to America in his essay, Nature. And every time our opening words remind us that we are all made of the same stardust, we are talking about a simple, amazing fact to which Waldo testified, a fact that wasn't proven until our own lifetime. Brahman, or the essence of reality, or whatever you want to call it, is in us. And now, a new generation of scientists say that this consciousness built everything, including us, and it's like gravity, a force of nature, a natural law. Materialists instead say the brain produces consciousness, a very different outlook. Fine. But if you're looking for a way to build togetherness, you might want to stick with the theory that we are all one in body and mind, and not just because it makes for excellent opening words. In our world of identitarianism, where so many like to dwell more on our differences than our similarities, we could use a lot more of a religion about being one. By the way, when you talk with Waldo on your time machine side trip to save Lincoln, please say, Waldo, why not explain your Hinduism by saying Jesus also talked about how nature and God were one and the same? That way people won't hate you so much and might give you a real job. But we left the landscape artists Olmsted and Vaux waiting to hear if they had won the right to design a park worthy of the people of New York. Of course they did, and written accounts of why say they won because it was the most complete and visionary of the 33 submissions. Well, so what? Actually, this is so what number 1. So patience, please. Here's some nature. And I think we have a slide of it here. A slide that has fractals like crazy. They're called fractals, and it's extremely irregular shapes in which any chosen part is similar in shape to a given larger or smaller part when magnified or reduced to the same size. So we need a picture of that, obviously. If you look at the fern there, and this may be hard to see, the whole fern frond on the left, but on the right you see a close-up. And each leaflet is an identical replication of the whole fern frond, and each leaflet has in turn its own leaflets that are replications of what looks like the whole frond. It follows a fractal algorithm, okay? It's probably, D is approximately equal to 1.3, 1.5. Wow, this is important. Now, you've been very patient, but you are now at so what? Number 2. What's the point? The point is, many views of nature, oceans, forests, prairies, are loaded with these fractal shapes, and our brains love them. This is generated by a computer that understands this math, and again the ratio is approximately 1.3, 1.5, because our mind loves it. It produces measurable benefits for the human brain and body. largely because the visual system is tuned to these patterns. Fractal patterns in nature are easy for the brain to process. They reduce stress, quiet the amygdala, increasing calming alpha brain waves, and restore attention, often in as little as 3 minutes. That's from the Neuroscience News. We also know that planting of lots of trees in cities lowers stress, reduces heat and mental fatigue, lowers aggression, and when planted in high crime areas, there's a decrease in theft and vandalism. A major study in New Haven, Connecticut found that a 10% increase in tree canopy corresponded with a 15% drop in violent crime, and property crime fell by 14% because of a dense planting of trees. These findings held even after controlling for income and other socioeconomic factors. Similar tree plantings in Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Charlotte, North Carolina are producing similar results. Well, if this fractal business is a natural law, then it would be found elsewhere, and it is, for instance, in the composition of music. This picture of a prairie just oozes with fractal geometry, and there is an auditory equivalent. For example, Aaron Copland's orchestral piece, The Open Prairie, has, as does this photograph, enough repetition to feel coherent, enough variation to stay interesting, recursive motifs as a small idea repeats in altered forms across the piece. All of those are the sound equivalents of fractal shapes. And when composers sit to write music that sounds and looks like spring, for instance, they will succeed or fail based on their ability to mirror nature with their many notes. Now, the number of possible combinations of notes, rhythms, and other musical elements is astronomically large. So large that for all practical purposes, it is infinite. But I'm sure every composer enjoys a challenge. And here is Olmsted and Vaux. Remember Olmsted and Vaux? We took a long time to get back to them. Here is their Central Park. It's called the American Elm Canopy over the mall. And it has beaucoup branching patterns, self-similar silhouettes, and repeating bifurcations at multiple scales. In other words, it's loaded with fractals that our brain enjoys. And this is why their design won. Nature's fractals that are so good for us and interesting. Of course, Olmsted and Vaux, they didn't know about the natural laws behind messy, asymmetrical nature, and neither did Waldo. But they knew that they could be found to be naturally beautiful, and natural beauty is good for you. Or as Waldo put it, nature doesn't just inspire, it transfigures. Which brings us to so what, number 3. What in the heck does this have to do with the Brahman and I am that, thou art that, all of this is that? Waldo's answer? The design of nature is in us too. And that is why we have a near universal idea of beauty. And universal ideas are what we're talking about. Many have noted that Carl Gustav Jung and Ralph Waldo both believe that the wisdom of our earlier forms live on within us and give us these universal shared ideas. Both Jung and Waldo were into the Vedas of India. that say everything shares the same consciousness and its ancient wisdom. You know, that hidden volcano of wisdom deep within us that we just use to cook hot dogs instead of using it to create world peace, that wisdom. Jung often showed the following picture. It's of a fish embryo and a human embryo side by side. Seems odd. They both have gills, and in fact, the embryos of most of Earth's creatures are almost indistinguishable in their early days. His point? That just as our physical bodies carry the anatomical history of our evolutionary ancestors, our minds carry the psychological history. It was Jung's way and nature's testimony, reminding us that I am that, thou art that, all of this is that. Well, I brought my portable Emerson with me, and let's look to see if it still contains all that was in it when I first brought it years ago. Let's see. Yeah. Well, this means it's all still there, so evidently no one went back in time to tell Waldo to avoid hurting people's feelings with his new god, nature. I learned this technique from watching all those Back to the Future movies. And that's a good thing. For it's a good thing for us that Waldo kept on with his visionary business. Perhaps he could have been a little more politic with his visions of what religion should be, because later in life he lamented his work as a lecturer. He wrote in his journal, "Why has never even the poorest country college offered me a professorship in rhetoric? I think I could have trained an orator, though I am none. But colleges wouldn't hire him. He was considered an atheist, even though he used the word God all the time. But his God was nature, the process of evolution, really, that he described well before Darwin even proved it as a fact. So no college would touch him, even though by 1857 he was already known as the Sage of Concord. Obviously, being a visionary has its rough spots. Sage or not, as I mentioned 2,553 words ago, I'm over time again, it is now considered uncool, even foolish by some, to look to past thinkers, even to Ralph Waldo Emerson, for advice on today's problems. But as recently as 1855, when our now fading Principles and Purposes were written, Waldo was in fashion. UU minister Dan Harper, who in 2023 wanted to keep our Principles and Purposes, wrote, "In 1985, the thoughts and philosophies of Ralph Waldo Emerson were heavily invoked, both explicitly in the theological debates and implicitly in the foundational architecture of the revised Principles and Purposes and sources of wisdom of UUism. As the drafting committees and General Assembly delegates of 1985 sought to articulate what truly bound their pluralistic faith together, they looked back to their radical roots, specifically 19th century New England transcendentalism, of which Emerson was the chief architect. Emerson's philosophies were fundamentally woven into the 1985 Article 2. During that drafting process, theologians and committee members explicitly invoked Emerson's philosophy of spiritual intuition to justify this inclusion. This source is a direct intellectual descendant of Emerson's famous opening lines in his 1836 essay, Nature. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face. Why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? And so they wrote, describing our first and most important source of wisdom, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. That Waldo-inspired language has been removed from our new Article 2. But if you think Waldo had something enduring, something universal to say, be of good cheer. You can no more get rid of Ralph Waldo Emerson than you can get rid of Plato or the Vedas or fractal geometry or nature itself. Ralph Waldo isn't going anywhere. So now, let us finish up with some auditory fractals, Adrian's piano, that is. A fitting send-off for an afternoon walk in the woods, or perhaps a drive to your favorite scenic overlook of nature. Amen.
Time to dance. Got to do what Spirit says do. You've got to do what the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do. Oh Lord, you've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you've got to sing. Oh Lord, you've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you've got to dance. Oh Lord, you've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. 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 You've got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do. Oh Lord, you've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Thank you so much. That was lovely.
Life is a brief interval between birth and death. It is composed of a few motes between prelude and postlude. It is a drama quickly played between the rising and falling of a curtain. It is not time to play our wan melody. It is not time for us to act our own part. Life is a brief interval between birth and death. Help us celebrate the interval with as much joy as we can bring to this world and act as if our very lives depend on it. You may begin by supporting this congregation that works to make a more joyful world. Please place your gift in the basket as you leave or online at uuflint.org. Thank you.
And let us extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry out in our hearts until we are together again.